Thank you everyone for joining us today. Today, I'm so excited to have Anja Lukovic, our guest speaker, who's going to be sharing how design is helping people connect during COVID-19. My name is Mary Kim. I am a senior consultant at Bridge Innovate. We are a global network of business strategists, consultants, and designers that team up with you to spark distinctive design, courageous leadership, and agile change to transform your organization for growth and good. So today you're joining one of our Inspire series episode. Our Inspire series purpose is to share valuable insights and lessons to support your innovation journey wherever you are. So today we have a really exciting speaker I can't wait to introduce you to in a moment. So today we will be talking about connecting during COVID-19. So if you will proceed to the next slide, I'd love for you to share how you've been staying connected during this kind of uncertain time. You know, is there anything that's distinctively different than how you used to connect with people, or something that you're doing, you know, differently with others? I'd love to hear if you'll use the chat to share how you've been staying connected. We'll go ahead and see what comes up. I myself have been particularly enjoying Zoom birthday parties. Yes, virtual graduations. How else have you been? Using Zoom and Google to stay connected. Different platforms, yes. Anything else? Co-working with friends in other states using Zoom, Google Meet, FaceTiming, social media, seeing my nephew at the hospital, absolutely. Zoom and Google Meet, so much Zoom, yes. Anyone feeling the fatigue of virtual platforms? Increased use of video platforms, yes, absolutely. But so glad to hear that you are finding ways to make those connections, engaging with others, to share those special moments or learning moments, and staying, you know, continuously inspired. And we're excited to have you. So without further ado, I'd like Anja to jump in and share what we'll be hearing from her today. And later on, we'll have hopefully a quick moment to go through a couple of different questions at the end. So Anja, take it away.
Thank you, Mary. Hi, everyone. Again, my name is Anja. I'm an interaction designer at Google, and today we'll be looking at how design is helping people connect during COVID. We will answer the question, which is like, what is there to design at a big tech company like Google, which is a question I get a lot. Look more into Google Meet, which is the product I work on, and then a little bit about the project lifecycle and some lessons I learned for, you know, designing for COVID during COVID, and then hopefully have some time to answer some questions at the end. But first, let's look at kind of like my background and my journey and how I got where I got. So I started off at SCAD, Savannah College of Art and Design, and I know there's some SCAD alumni there. I got a degree in industrial design, and when I was still at SCAD, I did some internships. I went to Hexbug, where I was a robotics toy design intern. Then I went to BMW, where I was also an industrial design intern, focusing on in-car experiences, such as the dashboard and the backseat experience that involves VR. And then I went back to school and graduated, and then went over to Magic Leap, where I was also an industrial design intern, focusing on the future of mixed reality. And then kind of a shift happened. I got hired by Google as an interaction designer. And I first started on Google Cloud. I was there for about a year. And then I just recently switched to Google Meet. Now this was a lot of, you know, transition company-wise, but let's take a look at what this looks like on a map. There was a lot of movement going on. So I started off in Serbia. And went over to SCAD to study industrial design, then Texas for Hexbug, and then Bay Area for BMW, and then I went back to SCAD to graduate, and then to Florida for Magic Leap, and then finally where I am today, which is Seattle, where I worked on Google Cloud and I work on Google Meet. And as I said, this was a lot of transition, a lot of movement. I learned a lot about myself as a person, but also as a designer. But the biggest shift for me was actually this. I labeled myself as an industrial designer for a very long time. I actually went to a high school for design in Serbia, where my major was industrial design. And then Google came in and they asked me like, hey, we think interaction design might be a good fit for you. Would you consider that? And that kind of created this like crisis in me, like, wait, I thought I was an industrial designer. And then when I zoomed out and looked at, my journey and how much I was involved in tech, I realized that I used industrial design and interaction design as my tools to solve a problem at hand. And that I'm actually a UX designer. And I know this term is already ambiguous on its own, like what is a user experience designer? And especially in a big tech company like Google, I get this question a lot, like what is there to design? And I get this question a lot from all kinds of people, but especially my grandma. And I love this question because it's intriguing to me and it lets me know that people are actually curious, and I love to teach them like what is there to design in a big tech company like Google. And the best way I can describe it is actually through this really quick video.
I'll tell people, I work at Google. And what do you work on? I design search. And they kind of pause for a second and they're like, what is there to design? Oh, I know. It's Cat.
Hi, how can I help?
So all of this is user experience design, and a lot of things happen in a big tech company like Google. But the way I like to describe user experience is that it's making technology easy to use, the art and science behind making products that people love, and understanding your product's customers, having empathy for them, and solving their problems. Now let's look specifically into Google Meet. Again, this is the product that I work on. I've been on Google Meet over the past 3 months or so. Before that, I was in Google Cloud. And Google Meet was historically designed for enterprise paid customers, like G Suite customers. And it was never really designed for anyone outside that bubble. However, right as I joined Google Meet, something very interesting happened. COVID-19 was declared as a pandemic, and our whole world turned upside down. Everything shifted. Also the way, companies approach problems shifted. And I found myself on this new team leading a project that made me available to everybody as a response to the pandemic and helping people stay connected. So it completely shifted our customer base and our strategy, and to show you what that means and who those new people we're designing for are, let's look at this.
So it goes.
Hold up your answers. How is Vicky doing today? You're just a really hard worker.
So I really love this video because it shows how much, the usage of video calling platform like Google Meet shifted during COVID. Going from, being designed strictly for enterprise, I was now a part of this project that now made it available to everybody. Sorry, my cat is going crazy in the background chasing whatever she's chasing. And as we announced this to the world, people responded in ways that was completely beyond my imagination. And being an international student, where I relied on video calling platforms to connect with my family, it really, made I felt huge amount of responsibility and very grateful for being there to allow people to connect, especially in special times like these. And I've seen some incredible things happen, from the World Health Organization responding to say thank you, to kids using Google Meet to read books to one another. And I saw this number, which was also released publicly, that people spend about 3 billion minutes a day talking on Google Meet. And this was kind of hard for me to wrap my head around, what is really 3 billion minutes a day? So I converted it to years, and I found out that people spend about 5,700 years a day connecting on Google Meet during COVID. Now let's look at some of the things that were part of this project I was leading and some of the things that rolled out recently. First is taking our Google Meet landing page and announcing to users that there's something brand new coming, such as that we're making Meet available for free. And then also redesigning the page to kind of remove those main buttons and call to actions to get users where they need to be faster, such as start a new meeting or enter a meeting code to join. And then finally, as I said, we saw that shift from enterprise to, consumers. And especially during COVID, people are calling into meetings individually, whereas originally Meet was designed for conference rooms. So it was still a huge amount of people, but they would call from the same room, and that was a completely different experience. So I went ahead and designed a tiled view. And I know this seems very simple, yes, Anja, you put a bunch of, video feeds right next to each other, but there's a lot more actually that goes into it behind the scenes, which is how does this grid dynamically change? What is the motion design behind it? When a lot of people join the call, where does each tile move? And then also what is the animation and motion design of the volume indicator? How do you gently shift attention from one speaker to another to make everyone feel included? Now let's look at what kind of happened behind the scenes during these COVID projects. So a typical life cycle that I went through, project life cycle I went through is that, obviously project begins. And then there are project managers that partner with UX engineering and UX design and UX research to write a product requirements document where we, work together to list out what are all those features, what are the user journeys that we're trying to tackle, and go really, really into specifics and edge cases. And then I take that and use it as a guide while I'm designing. And then once I have some designs ready, then I bring in user research, and there are a couple of probably rounds of user testing, not just one. And then once the feedback comes in, I iterate on the design and finalize it. However, it doesn't really stop there. I wish it did. But then I have to go in and design all the specifications for implementation, kick off conversations with engineering, make sure they have everything they need to start building. And then once they're ready, they call me in to yell at them for using the wrong fonts and the wrong colors and the wrong buttons. And then we go in and make sure everything's aligned, that it's pixel perfect. And of course, then there's, a time for launch, which is always very exciting. However, during COVID and on a project like this that I'm leading, it's very challenging because normally this project lifecycle on a project of this scale and the complete strategy shift as a product would take maybe a year or more to go through all the director reviews and all the product reviews and all the UX reviews. However, it took us 2 months, and it was really a huge team effort. I can't tell you how many times I had meetings at 1 a.m. with management where I made some design changes, and then I would go to bed, and by the time I wake up, the engineering team in Sweden already built where I designed that night before I went to bed. So we were just constantly working and trying to, be there for people as designers and engineers and researchers and management. And it's important to know that things don't really, stop after launch. And, in a time like this, when it's really difficult to iterate and user test, it's important to listen for feedback. And we have an awesome research team, which was kind of working in parallel, even at times where we didn't really have time to test our designs. They went in and started doing their own research in the wild and came back with really valuable feedback. And as I said, things don't really stop right after launch. Of course, there's a moment of celebration, good job, everyone. We did something that would take us a year to do in 2 months. But what's even more important is what comes next, which is, okay, now we opened the platform, people are using it, we're helping them connect during COVID, but we also need to hear what they have to say. What is the feedback that we're getting now that our product is out there in the wild? And once we, hear that feedback, it's important to me as a designer to know what that is and to gather it and really be mindful of it. And then once we know what users expect and want, then that kicks off another project lifecycle and everything starts from the beginning again. Now, going into some of the things that really briefly I learned while designing for during COVID is that team-wise, it's really important to over-communicate and stay in touch. Everyone's working from home now, our lives have changed. It's important to be active on chat and over email, which I'm really bad at. And it's important to put those meetings on your calendar. And I know it's a double-edged sword because if you're there and trying to over-communicate, at least in my case, my calendar just overpopulates with things, and I end up having meetings about meetings about meetings. But while I was designing for this big push, this has proven to be one of the most important things to make a product successful. Another thing I learned is that time of crisis can be a catalyst for innovation. As a designer, I pay a lot of attention to human behavior. How does a person interact with themselves, with their environment, with people around them, with objects around them? But, now with this pandemic, our world's turned upside down. And what I thought was, human behavior 6 months ago doesn't really apply to what it is today. And the way we interact with ourselves, with our environment, with one another, with objects around us completely changed. So I try as a designer, while designing for COVID, to be mindful of this and understand that what I knew doesn't really apply anymore. And then another thing, which I think is really important to mention here, it's important to also take care of ourselves and prioritize self-compassion and detach whenever you can. In my case, I spend hours and hours at work talking about COVID and how we might design for it and how we might improve our product. And then I get off work and I'm now talking to my partner or my family members or my friends about COVID. And it's really hard to, draw the lines between the two. And I'm sure, that's the case for probably some of you as well while working from home. So, take a minute to step back. It's okay, we'll get through this. Thank you. Hopefully we have some time for Q&A.
Yes, thank you, Anja. We definitely have a few minutes for a Q&A. If there's any questions, please use the chat. We'll try to cover different questions as they come in. Let's see if anyone has anything to share. Whoever is the fastest typist, typer. So Anja, I think before a first question comes in, maybe we can set something, in terms of, you mentioned people's behavior change and how that became a catalyst for innovation at Google, especially on the project like Google Meet. Is there anything that stood out to you in terms of, designing, especially like the grid view, which I know someone like Lindsay had mentioned before? What kind of, I know you can't go into kind of the deep level, but what are some of the insights that you noticed that changed significantly that helped design a product like Google Meet?
Yeah, sure. So one thing that comes to my mind is, as I said, Google Meet was designed for enterprise, and enterprise customers mostly use Google Meet on web. But something we didn't expect as we opened up Meet for everybody is that, actually people, consumers, don't really use their computers to talk to family or connect with one another. They use their phones. And that's something that we didn't expect at all, because we were just going in with that bias of like, hey, we're mostly web, people are going to use us on web, and that's something we prioritize over time. But, that behavior doesn't really apply to people during COVID. Like, people want to connect quickly. They want to, have a video conferencing tool, a video calling tool available to them in a matter of a couple of taps or clicks on their phone.
Definitely. I think same here for someone who has family overseas. Definitely phone tends to be kind of the device that I go to first. So we have a flood of questions coming in. Let's see how many we can get through. Let's start with this one. How do you think your work/role will change post-COVID? That's quite interesting. What's your perspective on that?
That's a great question. And I've been asking that question, myself as well, because, once COVID ends, we don't really know what the behavior will be on Google Meet. Like, are people going to use it as much? Potentially not. So I think my role would change drastically, whereas, now I'm pretty much designing for right now. Like, we're moving fast. We're trying to launch as fast as possible. As we speak, there are like features that are launching next week. So I'm designing for like things that are launching every 2 weeks. So it's pretty rapid. Whereas normally, especially when I was in Google Cloud, I worked on one project for months at a time. And I have plenty of time to do as much research as possible. So I think my role will change. I think, in the future, I'll be working more on like longer term projects, and something that's maybe along the lines of like maybe a little bit more of like future thinking, like visioning what is the future of Google Meet going to be like. and, you know, which is kind of like the complete opposite of what I'm doing right now.
Yeah, definitely. I know there's probably a lot of reactive component to things that you're doing, as you mentioned with the features, but future thinking, I think that's definitely a way to explore new opportunities with Google Meet. I think there are a couple of questions specifically around Google feature. Maybe we can get through this really quickly. Lindsay had a question about, have you considered addressing breakout space in Google Meet? And there's another one, I think that's kind of on the similar lines. Do you see Meet integrating with Classroom in the near future? So some of the feature component.
So Meet is very heavily used in the education space. Actually, I think it's called Google Classroom, and Meet is a part of that package. And I know that teachers and professors across the world have been using it. As far as the specific features like breakout rooms go, unfortunately, I can't speak to what we have planned for the future. One thing I can say is there are, you know, a lot of things that we, you know, have in mind and we're designing for at the moment. And again, going back to that kind of like putting the product out in the world and listening and being like, we hear you, we really do hear you. And as a designer, like go in and actually read through all the comments and feedback that the people write. So, you know, it's very top of my mind.
So I think we really only have room for one more question, but there are so many. So maybe Anja, I'll share this with you afterwards and see if we can share as a follow-up. There's one that says, from Jenny, what do you think remote connecting will look like 10 years from now? You have mentioned future thinking, so this is getting 10 years ahead.
Wow, that's a really interesting question. I can potentially, I don't know if 10 years from now will be a good timeline for that, but I can potentially see maybe the use of, you know, going beyond the, you know, black rectangle that we see everywhere, and maybe potentially utilizing some VR or augmented reality to connect with people around us. And I've seen, there's a project called, it's by HoloLens. It's about telepresence or something like that. I don't remember the exact name of the project, but basically when you put the headset on, you can, you know, if both people are wearing it, but they're in different locations, they use external cameras to like scan the body. So you can be sitting on your couch and your friend will be sitting next to you. And even though that sounds like really far away, the technology is already available. I think it's only a matter of time until we start connecting in ways beyond just the black rectangle that we're used to seeing.
Great. Thank you, Anja. There are also a lot of other great questions that came through about your experience being a designer. How did you, did Google reach out to you? So we'll make sure to share these questions with you. Thank you again, and we'll try to follow up with more, questions and answers. Hopefully Anja will be willing to do so, and I hope you all have a great rest of the day. Thank you again for joining.
Thank you all. And also one thing to add, please feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm always happy to answer any questions.
Thank you,
all right,
Anja.
thank you all.